This is Rising Zan Samurai Gunman, a name that immediately tells me you should probably already own this game. I mean, come on, that's an awesome name. And this review is dedicated to everyone who ever in earnest used the term God of War clone. Because, by your logic, every God of War clone, God of War included, was in fact a Devil May Cry clone, and much more relevant to this, every God of War clone, God of War included, as well as Devil May Cry, were actually Rising Zan Samurai Gunman clones. This was a very early spectacle brawler on the PS1, and it's pretty cool. Now I'm going to do my best to give you the story without quoting the theme song here, but you play a guy named Johnny, who had big dreams of becoming a hero. He got his face kicked in, decided, let's go to Japan, learn how to be a samurai, then come back under an alias.
And by the way, my name isn't Johnny. It's the super ultra sexy hero, Zan.
And that name alone should tell you to buy this game. I mean, come on, that's an awesome name. And now he's back to help save his town from an evil he could not stop before. The story itself feels kind of similar to that of God Hand on the PS2. What with the crazy, weird characters that you end up coming across, as well as how lighthearted the game is. However, this game does seem to be trying to take itself a little bit more serious than God Hand would ever dream of. Whether or not that's a good thing, well, that's up to you, but personally, I think it strikes a nice balance without coming off completely tonally inconsistent with itself. The game is a high-speed spectacle brawler where you fight multiple opponents at once, utilizing your various samurai, cowboy style of fighting, and I think it works quite well. All of your sword techniques are mapped to the X button, all of your gun techniques are mapped to the triangle button, as well as all of your blocking techniques are mapped to the R1 button. There is one issue with the overall controller layout that does make this game a little bit of a tricky beast though, and that is each offensive and defensive ability at your disposal also has more advanced techniques. For example, if you want to pull off a sword thrust instead of a basic slash, you have to tap forward on the directional pad or control stick twice, and then the sword button. Same with wanting to parry with your defensive button, which is a useful ability, as well as utilizing your revolver's insane rapid fire abilities. Now the problem with this is, at least in analog mode anyway, is it doesn't seem to recognize inputs in between the attacks. So if you're spamming the X button just hacking away, it's going to be very hard to get a special attack in. And by the end of it, I was averaging one special ability out of every 3 times I tried to activate it. So it's not exactly working with the greatest batting average here. But aside from that, the controls work well enough, and honestly, you can get by just with your basic attack and defense abilities. So it's not as big a deal as it seems. The one really big problem this game has, however, is the camera. And this is a constant problem with a lot of 3D games that came out during this time. But this one is exceptionally terrible, like to the point where this would be the thing that makes me dissuade you from picking up this game, despite how awesome it is. The camera basically picks a director's choice camera angle to start out each area, and then once you start fighting, if you want to lock onto an opponent using the L1 trigger, you can do that. However, that button also controls the modified camera, which is activated by holding it. Which means if you want to lock on to someone, which only really affects your ranged attacks hitting them and not actually your camera locking onto them, which is really dumb, there's a good chance you might actually just sort of recenter the camera around your character as well, which might also be awful. So yeah, the camera, really mind-blowingly terrible in this game. Not the worst I've seen in a 3D game from this time, but certainly something that makes this game a lot harder than any enemy in this game. And that's really frustrating because the camera makes this very close to unplayable. Each level is completely different, which is saying something for a spectacle brawler like this game. Because a lot of 3D spectacle brawling games are very similar. It's basically move from area A to area B, and in each area kill X number of enemies as stylishly as possible. And sure, there's plenty of that here, but in between area A and B, you're going to come to like a sub-area A. And sub-area A might have like a platforming section, which actually plays surprisingly smooth. Or you might come into a room that's on a timer, and you have to complete a certain objective before the timer runs out. Or you might get a legendary patented all-button event. Sort of like a proto QuickTime event, except instead of entering a specific button combo within a time frame, mash all of the buttons as fast as you can and maybe you'll make it out of there. From what I've noticed, these things are actually really strict, and I'm not good at button mashing, so the highest I could even get in an all-button event was like the second lowest rating, which is unfortunate, but they are very stylish, they are very cool, and the nice thing is, they're not even mandatory. If you're bad at button mashing like I am and you're failing these things, it's not going to really penalize you all that much. Worst case scenario is it's an area trap, and you take a little damage. That's it. Beyond that, there's no real penalty for failing these, which is excellent, especially if you're bad at these, like I am. But at the end of the day, if you can get past that really awful, awkward camera, and the somewhat awkward special attack inputs, you have a really fun, varied brawler. And you don't see that very much, which is what makes this game so fascinating. Now, the overall presentation to Rising Zan is actually really good. It's got a wide variety of characters. I do wish there was a wider variety of enemy characters. Most of them are palette swaps, but there is an adequate number of different enemies. And despite this game being in the Old West, which is typically a very samey environment, just given how much the Old West there was, this game's pretty varied with its environments. And I do like the whole Japanese samurai meets cowboy aesthetic that this game is kind of going for. That's definitely something very cool, and honestly I can only think of off the top of my head one other game that did it, which makes this one pretty damn unique. Audio-wise, the soundtrack is adequate. A lot of the songs are high-paced, action-y themes, which work for what they need to do, but what's really great here is the theme song. I mean, seriously, just go do yourself a favor, look up the theme song. That theme song alone warrants the purchase of this game, which is already like 4 or 5 different things that automatically warrant the purchase of this game. Basically, get this game, is what I'm saying. The voice acting is in that sort of so bad it's good range, and I do rather appreciate Zan's voice acting. I think he was done quite well. The one thing about voice acting I don't like, however, is the sort of monster guys you run into, because they tend to just run off of repeated, like, voice clips that just loop over themselves, and it's not really interesting, and it's not really all that good. So at the end of the day, the sound presentation is above average, but with a pretty kick-ass theme song. And that is Rising Zan Samurai Gunman. It is a completely kick-ass game if you can get past the awful camera. And I know that's a hard thing to do, but if you can push past it, you've got a real fun game here that is actually pretty challenging. Ultimately, this game isn't very expensive. It has gone up in price a little bit over the years. About 2 or 3 years ago, you could get it for about $5. Now it's sitting more or less at about $20, but I think that's still a worthwhile price. It was available in all regions, and if you're in Japan, you can actually download it off PSN, which I think was a weird choice to add to the Japanese PSN, but hey, it makes this game more known, which is kick-ass because this is a good game. And this might be the earliest example of a proper 3D spectacle brawler. I don't know if this is the first one, but it's a damn good one, and honestly, it might be the most varied example I can think of, compared to all the other Rising Zan Samurai Gunman clones out there.